We are describing support and reassurance. Showing support includes expressions of praise and appreciation of the client's abilities, qualities, and coping effects. The interviewer's active approval of the client's qualities and achievements. The interviewer's attitude towards the interviewee discussed earlier is supportive. Specific supportive interventions goes beyond the general supportive context. Supportive interventions communicate confidence in the client's ability to cope with their problems. Reassurance and expressions of support are often appropriate, but they can also inhabit a more helpful expression of feeling. Supportive statements are most likely to be effective if the interviewer can specifically identify the interviewee's feeling or behavior of which the interviewer is expressing approval or encouragement.
How has it been since the last time we met up?
So I've gotten a job and I found an apartment that I'm going to move into, and I feel like things are really looking up.
Good, I'm glad you're doing a great job bettering yourself.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I will be describing advice. Advice can be defined as a non-cohesive recommendation provided to a client about a decision or an action. Social workers use advice to help clients make personal changes, assume new roles, meet basic needs, and implement decisions. The request for advice must clearly come from the client and not be a manifestation of the needs of the worker. Advice should be offered only in the context of a therapeutic alliance. A worker should offer advice only after helping clients to explore their own ideas and strategies. Accepting the client's request for advice at face value is not always advisable. So since my father's diagnosis, it's been hard, like on the family and everything, and we really want to keep him at home because he's more comfortable, and it's a lot better than just being at hospitals.
So it seems to me, given your father's diagnosis and your shared goal of keeping him at home, you may want to consider arranging for in-home personal care, or given your father's diagnosis and your shared goal of keeping him at home, an option that many people have tried in your situation is in-home personal care. Or given your father's diagnosis and your shared goal of keeping him at home, have you thought about in-home personal care?
No, but I will consider it.
I am to describe humor. Humor is not necessarily a laughing matter. Humor can be a productive intervention technique for achieving the objectives of the interview. Despite this, humor is rarely employed in the social work practice. The feeling is that humor and professionalism are actually two different concepts. They are opposite of each other. Humor enables us to deal with feelings that we find too painful to confront directly. Humor has been used towards reducing occupational stress in response to depressing, upsetting topics. And how has your sobriety been? Since the last time we met, you were about 2 weeks sober then, so how have you been doing now?
Yeah, that didn't last too long.
Oh, why do you say that?
Things have just been stressful and I like to drink.
Oh, okay, well I hope that we can turn that around.
Would you like to go grab a drink after? I will be describing silence. Silence as being discussed at this point is not the silence that one maintains while listening to the presentation of the interviewee. Silence in terms of its meaning here refers to the momentary simultaneous suspension of communicative activity by both the participants in the interview. Both interviewer and interviewee uses silence as an intervention that could move the interview ahead. In general social interactions, we feel compelled to talk even if we have nothing to say. We use the silent treatment to punish by denying ourselves to others. We also use silence to communicate what we think so little of the other person that we will not exert ourselves even in converse. We regard silence as a manifestation of social failure. When people come together in the intent of talking to one another, silence generates social anxiety and is embarrassing. Silence, unlike a pause, is a temporary, deliberate withholding of speech. Silence is a period filled with lack of speech in which both interviewer and interviewee participate. Silence is a significant meaning of communication. Interviewers need to predict their response on some understandings of the meaning of the interviewee's behavior in maintaining the silence. The meaning of silence varies from interviewee to interviewee and may be different from the same interviewee at different points in the interview.
Would you like to tell me about what happened last weekend?
I'd rather not talk about it.
Okay, well, when you're ready to talk about it, we can talk about it.
I went out with my friends last weekend thinking I wouldn't drink, but I was just too tempted, and I drank a little too much, and things just went bad, all the way bad from there.
Oh, gotcha.
I will be describing probing questions. Probing ensures that the interviewer does not accept significant but general statements from a client. Probing is not a cross-examination technique, but rather a judicious process of exploitation that permits both interviewee and interviewer to see the situation in greater detail that clarifies what has happened. Probing questions that seek more specific information may be necessary because the initial answer is insufficient, irrelevant, unclear, or inconsistent with some information offered previously. Probing questions are successive approximations of the detail interviewers need to know if they are to be helpful. The word probe or probing tend to evoke a negative reaction among social workers. Probing implies an active interviewer and a passive interviewee who is required to answer questions. Probing most often is a legitimate request for further detail. Probing is different from a prying question, which would be characterized as a more unwarranted, more intrusive. Probing questions are designed to help the client make these feelings more explicit. Probing questions are less confusing when they are specific. Using probes, the interviewer should first repeat the specific aspect of the interviewee's presentation about which the interviewer wants clarification or elaboration. So since your husband's accident, since he's back to being himself, how do your kids feel about you going back to work?
Well, the kids are all for it.
All for what?
Well, they think it would be good for me. I would get out and be less concerned about the house and have some interest. They know it will mean more cooperation on their part in the housekeeping. They say they are ready to do this.
I am to describe confrontation. So the purpose of confrontation is to point out discrepancies in the client's presentation that reflect unrecognized conflicts, defenses, and motives that obstruct desired changes. By describing contradictions, the interviewer tries to help the client become aware of, understand, and control defenses, underlying feelings, and conflicts that affect problem resolution. Confrontation can be used to identify discrepancies between values and behaviors, feelings and behaviors, and the view of the self and real self, express in underlying feelings and verbal and nonverbal behaviors. Confrontation disrupts habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. It stimulates self-examination by presenting the interviewee with a contradiction that he or she is invited to resolve. Confrontations that are argumentative, overbearing, or critical are likely to elicit negative client responses and may damage the helping relationship. Confrontation is designed to stimulate the interviewee to take a careful look at the situation and to help the client feel free enough and safe enough to take that look. Confrontations are based on observations of the client's behavior in an interview. And the more detailed the content, the more difficulty the client may have in rejecting the validity of confrontational statement. Confrontations may be delivered right after an observation of an instance of a discrepancy, or the interviewer can wait to determine if there is a pattern and then present the pattern in a confrontation.
I want to be fit, but I don't have time to exercise.
You don't have time?
Since I retired, I just want to relax.
As you talk, I'm wondering. On the one hand, you say you value your health and fitness, and on the other hand, you're not exercising as the doctor recommended to lose weight. How do you explain this?
Self-disclosure. Interviewer's self-disclosure refers to the interviewer's verbal statements that reveal something personal about the interviewer. Interviewees respond positively to clinician self-disclosure. Clients like self-disclosing interviews better than non-disclosing interviews and regard them as warmer. Self-disclosure also has a positive effect on the interview. Clients rate it as very helpful, and it increases the level of their involvement within the interview. Self-disclosure applied with skill achieves a variety of interview objectives. Clients may feel anxious about whether they are strange or crazy.
Eileen?
I feel so guilty when I don't give him what he wants.
I think there are many women who were raised to put the feelings of others before their own. I know I struggled with this when my husband and I were first married. You can end now.